AITA for refusing to attend my best friend's wedding after she publicly humiliated me over a bridesmaid dress. I, 28F, have known my best friend, Anna, 29F, since we were both in kindergarten. We've been through everything together. High school drama, first loves, terrible jobs, heartbreak, and now we're both in our late 20s navigating adulthood. Anna has always been a bit of a perfectionist, and I've always been her ride or die, as she puts it. When she got engaged last year, I was over the moon for her and immediately offered to help with whatever she needed for the wedding. I thought I was going to be her maid of honor, but she surprised me by asking me to be a bridesmaid instead. No big deal, I said. I'm just happy to be a part of her special day. So, the wedding planning began. Everything seemed fine at first, until the dress shopping started. Anna and I have very different tastes. She's into traditional, princess-like gowns, while I've always leaned toward more casual and simple styles. When she sent us the options for bridesmaid dresses, I was a little concerned because none of them were styles I'd usually go for, but I didn't want to rock the boat. I said I'd try them on and see what I thought. The first dress I tried on was this horribly tight, shiny fabric monstrosity that barely fit and made me feel like a sausage in a casing. I sent a picture to Anna, thinking it was better to get her input, and she texted back that it looked perfect. I didn't want to make a fuss, so I just went with it, even though I felt incredibly uncomfortable. The next dress was slightly better, but still not something I'd ever choose to wear again, and definitely not something I'd be happy to wear to an event as important as her wedding. Then came the issue of alterations. The dress I'd been given didn't fit right, so I had to get it altered. I went to a tailor and explained what needed to be fixed. The alterations weren't crazy. They were mostly just to take in the waist and hem the length. When I told Anna, she seemed a little annoyed, and I didn't really understand why. I figured it was because I mentioned the dress wasn't really my style to begin with. Things started to get weird when the group of bridesmaids, including me, went for a fitting session a month before the wedding. Anna had the dresses all lined up, and when I walked in, she immediately gave me a cold look. I wasn't sure what was going on, but I just thought she was stressed out, so I didn't make a big deal of it. But then, as soon as I stepped into the dress and turned around to show her and the others, Anna gasped and said, "Oh my God, this is absolutely not going to work." I was confused. I thought the dress fit fine. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't horrible either. She looked at me, then looked down at the dress, then looked back up at me, and said, "You look like you're drowning in it. This just isn't what I envisioned for my wedding." I felt like I'd been slapped. I didn't understand what was happening. I tried to brush it off and said, "Well, I can have it altered a bit more if that's what you think," but she just shook her head, her face clearly annoyed. She pulled me aside and said, "Look, this is supposed to be a picture-perfect day. I want all my bridesmaids to look amazing, and you just don't look like you fit in with the rest of us." She didn't say it outright, but it was obvious that she meant I wasn't looking as beautiful as the other bridesmaids, who were all slim, tall, and looked amazing in their dresses. I was heartbroken. My best friend, the person I thought would have my back no matter what, was basically telling me I wasn't good enough for her wedding. I had always been supportive of her, even when she made choices I didn't agree with, but this was different. This felt like a personal attack. I wanted to leave, but I stayed, mostly because I didn't want to cause a scene in front of the other bridesmaids. After the fitting, Anna texted me saying we needed to have a serious talk about the dress. She asked me to meet her at a coffee shop, and I agreed, though I felt sick to my stomach about it. When we met, she started off by telling me how important this day was to her and how she needed everything to be perfect. I nodded, trying to understand, but I was already on edge. Then she said, "I've been thinking, and I don't think you should wear that dress anymore. It's just not working, and I don't want it to ruin the look of the bridal party." I was in shock. I asked her, "So what am I supposed to do? Just not be in the wedding?" She stared at me blankly and then said, "I don't want to say it, but maybe that's for the best." I felt my stomach drop. She was seriously suggesting I not be in her wedding because of a dress. At that moment, I snapped. I told her that if she cared more about her wedding looking perfect than about our friendship, then maybe I shouldn't be there at all. I told her I wouldn't continue to play a role in a wedding where I wasn't valued as a person, just as a prop. She got really quiet, and then she started crying. I wanted to comfort her, but I was so angry and hurt that I couldn't bring myself to do it. I left the coffee shop that day, and we didn't speak for a week. I thought about what she said and whether I was overreacting. Eventually, I came to the conclusion that if she could throw away a years-long friendship over something as shallow as a dress, then maybe she didn't deserve me as her bridesmaid. I told her I wouldn't be attending her wedding and that I was stepping down as a bridesmaid. I didn't expect her to take it well, but I didn't expect her to completely cut me out of her life either. Since then, she's posted about how devastated she is on social media, and she's told mutual friends that I was being overly dramatic and that I didn't care about her special day. Some people have told me that I'm in the wrong and that I should have just sucked it up for her, but honestly, I don't feel like I should have to be treated that way for the sake of a wedding. AITA for refusing to go to her wedding after she publicly humiliated me over a dress. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law attend my wedding after she made inappropriate comments about my appearance. I, 28F, am getting married in a few months to my fiancé, Ben, 30M. We've been together for about 5 years, and while we've had our ups and downs, we're both really excited for our big day. The wedding planning has mostly gone smoothly, but recently, a situation has come up with my future sister-in-law, Emma, 35F, that has me questioning whether I'm in the wrong here. To give some background, Emma and I have always had a tense relationship. She's always been very outspoken and has a habit of making offhand comments about people's appearances. I don't think she does it maliciously, but it often comes across as rude. For example, she once commented on how heavy I looked in a dress at a family event, and while she laughed it off as a joke, it really hurt my feelings. Ben has told her off in the past about her comments, but she doesn't seem to take him seriously. Despite all of this, I've always tried to keep things civil for Ben's sake, since he is really close to his family. Fast forward to a few weeks ago. I had my first dress fitting for the wedding. My mom, my maid of honor, Sarah, and my future mother-in-law, Joan, were all there with me. Ben's family is pretty close-knit, so we decided to invite Emma along to this fitting to be supportive and so she could see the dress I picked out. Ben was a little hesitant, but I thought it would be a nice gesture to include her. She had mentioned before how excited she was to see me in my dress, so I figured why not? Big mistake. The fitting was going really well. I loved the dress. My mom and Sarah were in tears, and Joan was all smiles. But when Emma walked in, I immediately sensed something off. She took one look at me and just said, "Wow, that dress is a lot." I laughed nervously, unsure if she was joking. But then she went on, "You look like a giant cupcake in that thing. It's just so puffy. I'm not sure it's really your style. Are you sure you want to go with that one?" The room fell silent. I could feel my face go hot, and my mom gave Emma a look, but Emma didn't seem to notice. She continued, "I mean, no offense, but you've got some curves and that dress just doesn't do your body any favors. It makes you look bigger than you are." At that point, I could feel tears welling up in my eyes. I had always been self-conscious about my weight, and I had worked hard to feel confident in my body. Ben had been incredibly supportive, and he had told me how beautiful I looked in the dress, but now hearing Emma's words, I felt humiliated. I tried to laugh it off, but the damage was done. Joan and Sarah were both visibly uncomfortable, and my mom said, "Emma, that was uncalled for." Emma didn't back down, though. She just shrugged and said, "I'm just being honest. Someone has to tell her the truth." After the fitting, I called Ben to tell him what happened. I was upset and hurt, and Ben was furious. He said he'd talk to Emma, but when he did, she completely denied saying anything wrong. According to her, she was just being honest, and I was too sensitive. She even suggested that if I were really confident about my body, I wouldn't have been so upset by her helpful feedback. Over the next couple of days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Ben tried to smooth things over, but I kept feeling this knot in my stomach whenever I thought about Emma. I eventually made the decision to talk to Ben seriously. I told him that I didn't want Emma at the wedding if she couldn't respect me and my choices. I explained how hurtful her comments were and how they had completely ruined what should have been a joyful moment for me. Ben was conflicted. He said he understood how I felt, but he didn't want to cause drama in the family. He suggested that maybe I could just talk to Emma myself, but I felt like it wasn't just about one comment. It was about a pattern of behavior that I couldn't ignore anymore. After a lot of back and forth, I decided to send Emma a message. I told her that while I appreciated her input on the wedding plans in the past, I couldn't move forward with having her involved in the wedding if she continued to make hurtful comments about my appearance. I told her that I needed her to respect me as I am, or I couldn't have her there. She responded by calling me dramatic and accused me of being insecure. She even suggested that maybe I wasn't ready for marriage if I couldn't take a little criticism. At this point, I was done. I told her the invitation was off the table, and I wasn't going to continue this conversation. Ben is now upset with me. He says that I overreacted and that it's not worth losing family over. He said I should have just let it go, and that my decision is making things worse. I feel like I stood up for myself and set boundaries, but he's not seeing it that way. He's been saying I've made a huge deal out of something small, and now it's causing tension between us and his family. He's even said that if I don't let Emma come, he might reconsider whether I'm ready for a relationship with his family long term. I feel so torn. On one hand, I think I deserve respect, especially on my wedding day, and I don't think I should have to tolerate her rude behavior. On the other hand, I don't want to cause more tension with Ben and his family. I don't know if I'm overreacting or if I'm justified in this decision. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law attend my wedding after she made those comments about my appearance. So, a little backstory. I, 28F, have one older sister, Megan, 31F, and we've always had a bit of a strained relationship. We were very close growing up, but as we got older, things started to change. She was always the golden child in my parents' eyes. She was the straight-A student, involved in every extracurricular activity, and always knew how to make people like her. Meanwhile, I was the troublemaker. I was the kid who got in trouble at school, rebelled against my parents' strict rules, and generally didn't have it together in the same way Megan did. It's not that I didn't try. I just didn't have the same knack for pleasing people, I guess. Now, fast forward to a couple of years ago. My father passed away unexpectedly. He wasn't super wealthy or anything, but he did leave behind a modest inheritance, which he had always said would be split equally between Megan and me. We weren't exactly rolling in money, so the inheritance was a big deal. When the will was read, everything seemed pretty straightforward. Half for Megan and half for me, just as our father had promised. But then, things took a turn. Megan, who had always been a little more business-minded, her words, not mine, decided that she needed more of the inheritance to help her buy a house. She's always been obsessed with appearing perfect and well-off, and apparently, buying a house in the right neighborhood was a big deal to her. She came to me with a proposition. She wanted me to give up my share of the inheritance in exchange for her helping me with my student loans, which were substantial. At first, I thought she was being generous, but then it became clear what she was really after. She told me that if I didn't give her the money, she would be really disappointed in me and that it would affect our relationship. She went on about how much harder her life was because she had to keep up with appearances and how it was unfair that I was getting the money while she needed it more. I was taken aback, but I wasn't going to let her guilt trip me into giving up what was rightfully mine. I refused. I told her I would not give up my share and that she needed to figure out how to get the money on her own if she wanted to buy the house. This led to a huge falling out between us. Megan was furious. She called me selfish, said I was making everything about money, and even brought up the fact that I had been a burden to the family in the past. It's like she was using every little thing from our childhood to make me feel guilty for not giving in to her request. At this point, I was done trying to be the good daughter and appease her. I was tired of being the one who always had to sacrifice just to make her happy. The whole thing escalated when she started telling other family members about our argument. She painted me as the villain and made it sound like I was refusing to help her out of pure selfishness. Our parents got involved, and they sided with Megan. They told me I was being unreasonable and that I should do the right thing for the sake of family. But I refused to back down. It was my money, and I had every right to keep it. Here's where it gets even worse. Megan and her fiancé recently set a wedding date, and she asked me to be a bridesmaid. When I told her I couldn't attend because of everything that had happened, she flipped out. She said I was ruining her special day and that I was being petty and vindictive. She even threatened to disinvite me from the wedding entirely, but then decided to let me stay as long as I agreed to give her the inheritance. She said that if I didn't, I would be ostracized from the family. At this point, I had had enough. I told her that I wasn't going to be part of her manipulative games, and I refused to attend the wedding. I feel like I've been nothing but supportive of her in the past, and yet she constantly tries to take advantage of me. I've always felt like I had to walk on eggshells around her to avoid her getting angry, but I'm done with that. Now, I'm the bad guy in the family. Everyone is telling me that I'm being unreasonable and that I should just let it go for the sake of family peace. But I feel like if I give in this time, it will only set a precedent for more manipulation in the future. My sister has always been the golden child, and I've always been the one who gets overlooked or dismissed. I don't want to keep letting her treat me this way, just because she expects me to be her doormat. So, AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding and for not giving up my inheritance? I feel like I'm in the right, but the whole family is against me. AITA for asking my husband to choose between me and his best friend after years of putting up with his behavior? I, 32F, have been married to my husband, Tom, 34M, for 8 years. I'll admit that I've always had some issues with his best friend, David, 33M. David has been a part of Tom's life since childhood, and I knew from the beginning that he'd be around for the long haul. At first, I tried to be understanding. I knew Tom and David had this deep bond, and I respected that. But over the years, David's behavior has crossed so many boundaries, and I'm finally at my breaking point. David isn't a bad person, per se, but he's definitely been disrespectful of our relationship, and I've let it slide for far too long. He's overly involved in our lives, to the point where it feels like he's a third wheel in our marriage. He constantly calls and texts Tom at all hours, sometimes even late at night. If we're planning something, David always manages to find a way to insert himself, even when it's not appropriate. He doesn't respect the concept of couple time. We'll be out on a date, and David will show up uninvited, acting like it's no big deal. I've tried talking to Tom about it multiple times, but it always feels like I'm being the jealous wife or overreacting. Over the last few months, things have escalated. It started with David showing up to our house unannounced, sometimes multiple times a week. He'd knock on our door and invite himself in, even when Tom and I had plans. It was starting to feel suffocating, like I didn't have any space in my own home. The final straw for me was when David started sending me messages and tagging me in posts on social media, even though I've never encouraged this. At first, it was harmless, a couple of funny memes or a comment here and there. But over time, his messages started to feel intrusive and borderline inappropriate. One day, he even sent me a text at 11 p.m. asking if I was feeling all right, because Tom had mentioned I was feeling a bit under the weather earlier that day. I didn't respond, but it was the kind of thing that made me uncomfortable. When I tried talking to Tom about it, he brushed it off. He told me that David didn't mean any harm and that I was making it into a bigger deal than it was. He said that David's just being a good friend, looking out for him. I told him that I needed some boundaries with David, especially when it came to our time together. Tom told me I was being unreasonable and that I shouldn't try to control his friendships. I'll admit, I was getting frustrated. It felt like Tom was more loyal to David than to me, his wife. I started to feel like I was the outsider in my own relationship. One day, I had enough. I sat Tom down and told him that I could no longer continue being in a marriage where I felt like I was competing with his best friend for his attention. I told him that I needed him to choose between me and David because I couldn't handle being treated like this anymore. Tom was furious. He accused me of being insecure and controlling. He said that David had been there for him through thick and thin, and I should respect their friendship. He said that asking him to choose was unfair, and that if I truly loved him, I'd accept David as part of the package. I tried explaining that I wasn't trying to get rid of David, but that I needed some respect in my own home and in my marriage. I wanted some space for just the two of us, without David intruding all the time. Tom said that if I couldn't handle David being in our lives, then maybe I wasn't the right person for him. We've been in this stalemate for the past week. I've had some time to think about everything, and I'm still standing by what I said. I feel like I've been patient for years, but I'm at my limit. I'm not trying to destroy Tom's friendship with David, but I feel like my needs and feelings are being completely ignored. I want a partner who prioritizes me and our relationship, not someone who continually lets another person's behavior affect our marriage. I've had people in my life tell me that I'm not being unreasonable, but Tom and his family think I'm overreacting. His sister even told me that I should just accept it because David is never going anywhere. I'm starting to feel like maybe I'm the one in the wrong here, and that I'm being selfish for wanting my husband's full attention. So, AITA for asking my husband to choose between me and his best friend? Or am I overreacting? AITA for not letting my brother's wife stay at my house after she demanded to be treated like a guest and not a family member? So here's the situation. I, 29M, live in a decent-sized 3-bedroom house that I've been renting for a few years now. My brother, 32M, and I have always had a pretty good relationship, though it's had its ups and downs over the years. Recently, my brother got married to a woman, 29F, who, to be honest, I haven't had the best experience with. We're all family, so it wasn't an issue when my brother and his wife decided to take a little trip to the city and wanted to stay with me for a few days. I've always been the type to offer a place to stay to family, and I assumed that my brother and his wife would be no different. But things took a turn when his wife, let's call her Emily, made some really strange demands right off the bat. They arrived at my house around 5 p.m. on a Friday, and I was in the middle of cooking dinner. Emily immediately started complaining about how the house was too messy for company and that she wasn't used to staying in places like this. I told her that I was sorry if she found it messy, but it was just a regular living space, and I didn't have a cleaning service or anything like that. I was making spaghetti for dinner, so I offered her a plate, but she declined, saying she wasn't hungry at the moment. My brother just laughed it off, but I could tell she wasn't thrilled with the place. It didn't seem like a huge deal at first, so I let it go. Later that evening, we were all sitting in the living room catching up, and Emily starts making little comments like, "I don't really understand why you don't have a nicer couch, and it must be so hard to live in a place without central air." At first, I thought she was joking, but she was actually being pretty serious. Now, I get that my place isn't a 5-star hotel, but it's clean, functional, and homey, so I didn't really know how to respond to these comments. Then, as the night went on, Emily started treating my house more like a hotel than a home. She started asking questions like, "Do you have a spare toothbrush? Can I get some towels? Where's the remote for the TV?" I was more than happy to provide what she needed, but it just started to feel weird. The next morning, I woke up to find that Emily had gone into my kitchen and started helping herself to breakfast. I had some basic stuff like cereal, eggs, and toast, but she started pulling out things I hadn't even touched like my granola bars and some special jam I had been saving. When I pointed it out, she just said, "I'm sure you don't mind. I just figured I'd help myself since I'm here." It felt awkward, but I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. We were family, right? So I just shrugged it off. Things started to escalate later that day. I had planned to spend the afternoon working on some personal projects and catching up on emails. I told my brother this in advance, and he was fine with it. But Emily seemed to take offense. She asked me when I was going to be doing something fun with them. I told her I had some work to do, and she responded by saying, "Well, I guess I'll just entertain myself then," in a really passive-aggressive tone. She then proceeded to go through my DVDs. Yes, I still have physical copies, and pick out movies for us to watch later, without even asking me if I wanted to join her. I was starting to feel like I was being forced into entertaining her, even though I'd told her I needed to focus on my own stuff. The real tipping point came when Emily asked me why I didn't have guest toiletries available. She literally asked me if I had shampoo and conditioner that she could use. I told her I had some in the bathroom, but they were the ones I use, and I wasn't sure if they'd be to her liking. That's when she said, "I didn't think I'd have to bring my own shampoo when staying at a family member's house. I mean, aren't you supposed to make your guests feel comfortable?" At this point, I started feeling really frustrated. I had offered them a place to stay out of kindness, but it felt like Emily wasn't appreciating it at all. Instead, It was like I was expected to cater to her every whim. That night, when we were all sitting down at dinner, I decided to speak up. I told Emily that I felt uncomfortable with the way she was treating my home, and I asked her to be more considerate of the fact that this was not a hotel, but my personal living space. I said that I was happy to have them stay, but I wanted to make sure it was clear that I couldn't keep up with the constant requests and criticisms. She looked at me like I'd just slapped her, and she immediately started accusing me of being unwelcoming and rude. She even said, "It's clear that you don't want us here, so maybe we should just leave." My brother jumped in and tried to defuse the situation, but I could tell he was embarrassed by her reaction. He said I was overreacting and that I should just let her be a little high maintenance, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was going way beyond what was acceptable. At that point, I decided to be firm. I told them that I felt disrespected and that if they wanted to stay, I needed Emily to stop acting like a guest in a hotel and start acting like a family member who understands how things work in a shared living space. I said I wasn't comfortable with the way things were going, and if she couldn't adjust, then maybe they should leave sooner than planned. To my surprise, my brother didn't get mad at me. He actually apologized for Emily's behavior and said he'd talk to her. They left the next day, and while things were tense between us, I thought that would be the end of it. However, I later found out that my brother talked to our parents about what happened. They sided with Emily, saying that I was being too harsh and ungracious about her being a little demanding. Our parents even suggested that I might need to lighten up if I want to keep good relationships with family. Since then, I've been getting texts from family members telling me that I should apologize to Emily for making her feel unwelcome. Now I'm wondering, AITA? Maybe I overreacted, but I don't think I was being unreasonable. I offered them a place to stay, and I don't think it's too much to ask for some basic respect in my own home. Was I wrong to draw the line? So, I, 29M, have a younger sister, Jess, 24F, who has always had a bit of a rebellious streak. Growing up, she was always the one who would skip class, sneak out to parties, and generally act like the world owed her something. I love her, but she has always made terrible decisions and expected others to fix her messes when things went wrong. I've been trying to support her in a way that encourages her to take responsibility for her life, rather than just bailing her out every time she needs help. A few months ago, Jess lost her job at a marketing firm. She was a few months into a contract position, and when the company downsized, she was let go. I know it's hard, especially with how the job market has been lately, but she didn't seem too worried about it. She told me she would find something new in a few weeks, but that was around the same time she found out she was pregnant. Now, I don't want to sound unsympathetic, but Jess has a history of making decisions without thinking of the long-term consequences. When she found out she was pregnant, she was with a guy who, to put it mildly, isn't the most stable person. I tried talking to her about the situation, but she didn't want to hear it. She was determined to keep the pregnancy and figure it out on her own, which, at the time, I respected. She's an adult, and I didn't want to push her too much. Fast forward to now. She's about 6 months pregnant, still hasn't found a stable job, and is living with her boyfriend, Mark, 27M. I've met Mark a few times, and he doesn't seem like the kind of guy who has his life together. I mean, he works at a bar and has a ton of debt. They barely have enough money to pay rent, and I know Jess has been borrowing money from our parents to cover basic expenses. It's honestly a mess, and I'm concerned about her future, especially with a baby on the way. Recently, Jess called me in a panic. She said that Mark had been drinking heavily, and they had a huge argument. He told her to leave, and she didn't know where to go. She asked if she could come stay with me temporarily. She mentioned she was just going through a rough patch and would figure things out, but she needed somewhere safe to stay for a few weeks. I told her I'd think about it, but I wasn't sure it was a good idea. I've been living on my own for a few years, and I have a small apartment. It's a one-bedroom, and while it's cozy, it's definitely not spacious enough for 2 people, especially with her being pregnant. The idea of her moving meant sacrificing my privacy and peace of mind. I would have to make space for her, rearrange my entire life, and I wasn't sure how long she'd need to stay. The thought of taking on that responsibility felt overwhelming. I talked it over with my girlfriend, Emma, 27F, who is supportive but also cautious about the idea. She reminded me that Jess has a history of not following through on her own responsibilities and tends to stay longer than planned when she moves in with people. Emma also pointed out that having Jess stay with us would put a strain on our relationship, especially since I would likely end up taking care of a lot of things while Jess got settled. I'm not saying Emma wouldn't help out, but it just didn't feel like a sustainable situation for either of us. After thinking about it for a couple of days, I called Jess back. I told her I understood she was in a tough situation, but I didn't think I could take her in. I explained that my apartment was too small and that it wouldn't be fair to her, the baby, or even Emma for her to stay. I also pointed out that I wasn't sure how long she'd be staying, and I needed to focus on my own life and responsibilities right now. Jess was not happy with my response. She started crying, saying that I was abandoning her when she needed me the most, especially since she was pregnant and struggling. She said that if I didn't help her now, she didn't know what she would do. I tried to stay calm and explain that it wasn't that I didn't care. I really do want the best for her, but I couldn't sacrifice my own mental health and comfort just to make her feel better in the short term. I suggested she reach out to our parents, who have a bit more space, or maybe look into some local shelters or support services for women in her situation. She told me she felt like I was throwing her out to the wolves and that I was being selfish. The next day, our mom called me to yell at me for not helping Jess. She said that I was being cold-hearted and that, as the older sibling, it was my responsibility to step up and help her, especially with a baby on the way. She reminded me of how much Jess had been through and how she needed a stable environment. I told our mom that I wasn't trying to be unsupportive, but that I just didn't think it was a good idea for Jess to move in with me, given the circumstances. Our mom wasn't happy with that answer and said I was being unreasonable. I feel like I'm stuck in the middle of this. I want to help Jess, but I also don't want to enable her poor decisions or set myself up for an untenable situation. At the end of the day, I have to look out for myself too, right? I've tried to be there for Jess in other ways, but I feel like this request is asking too much. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister move in with me after she lost her job and is pregnant, even though I know she's struggling. AITA for refusing to let my sister and her family stay with me after they showed up uninvited. So, I, 29F, have a sister, let's call her Lauren, 31F, and we have a pretty complicated relationship. Growing up, we were pretty close, but as we got older, we started drifting apart. Lauren got married about 5 years ago, and since then, she's become increasingly distant. I don't know if it's because she's been busy with her family or if she just doesn't care as much anymore, but we don't talk as much as we used to. And to be honest, it's been a bit of a relief for me because we just don't see eye to eye on a lot of things. I've always been the more independent one in the family. I've been living on my own for years, and I have a steady job in a city that's about 2 hours away from my hometown. I don't mind the distance. It's nice. My parents still live in the same area, but I don't go home as often as they'd like. Mostly, I just visit for birthdays and holidays. Now, here's where things got weird. Last week, I received a message from Lauren out of the blue. The message was pretty straightforward. She and her husband, James, 34M, and their 2 kids, ages 4 and 6, were coming to my city for a quick trip and would be staying for a few days. At first, I was like, okay, cool. I haven't seen them in a while. I guess I could use the company. But then I noticed something odd. There was no real request. It wasn't like, hey, would it be okay if we stayed at your place for a few days? It was more like, we're coming and we'll stay at your place. This caught me off guard because Lauren knows that I live in a small apartment. I don't have the space for 4 extra people, especially with 2 young kids. I'm also not particularly good with kids. I don't mind them, but I'm not one of those people who's comfortable taking care of them for long periods. And to be honest, I hadn't offered to host them. It just felt presumptuous to me. But, not wanting to cause drama, I figured I'd be polite and at least say something to let them know I was a little concerned. So I responded, saying something like, I'm glad you're visiting, but my place is pretty small and it's just me. I don't really have the space for all of you to stay here. I could help you find a hotel or suggest a few places nearby. Her response was pretty immediate. It'll be fine. We'll make it work. We really want to stay with you. The kids are excited to see their aunt. Okay, that last part made me feel guilty, but I stuck to my guns. I replied, I really can't make it work. I don't want you guys to be uncomfortable or cramped. I'm happy to hang out, but you should probably look for a place to stay. She didn't respond for a few days, and I thought that was the end of it. But then, yesterday, I get a call from my mom saying Lauren and her family are on their way to your place, and they'll be there in a couple of hours. They didn't want to bother you too much, but they're really excited to stay with you. I was absolutely stunned. First off, why didn't Lauren just call me directly instead of going through our mom? And second, I had explicitly told her I didn't have room for them. The entire situation felt like she was ignoring my wishes because she felt entitled to my hospitality. I was pissed. I immediately called Lauren, and when she picked up, I didn't even try to be polite. What the hell, Lauren? You can't just show up here after I told you I didn't have room. You need to turn around and go to a hotel. I'm not hosting you. She sounded a little shocked at my tone, but she kept insisting, it'll be fine. We just really wanted to spend time with you. The kids were looking forward to seeing you. We'll make it work, I promise. I told her that I didn't care, and she needed to turn around. I was not going to let them stay with me after they basically ignored my boundaries. After a lot of back and forth, she finally said, fine, you don't have to be so dramatic about it. I hung up, and at this point, I was feeling like the worst sister ever, but also like I had every right to stand my ground. My apartment is tiny, and I had made it clear I wasn't okay with hosting them. I couldn't believe they were trying to push me into doing something I was uncomfortable with. A few hours later, I got a text from my mom, basically saying I was being unreasonable and that I should have just let them stay because they were family. She went on and on about how I was being selfish and how I was letting my independence get in the way of family. She even suggested that if I didn't let them stay, it would be a real blow to my relationship with Lauren. Now, I'm feeling super conflicted. I don't want to be that person who doesn't help family, but I also don't think I should have to sacrifice my comfort just to accommodate someone else. My mom is telling me that I'm overreacting and that I should have been more understanding, but I really don't think I did anything wrong. I even offered to help them find a place to stay, and it's not like they didn't have other options. Am I the asshole for refusing to let my sister and her family stay with me after they showed up uninvited? Edit. For everyone saying I should have just been the bigger person and let them stay, I want to clarify a couple of things. 1. I never said I wouldn't spend time with them. I offered to hang out, just not in my apartment. 2. I've always been the one to make plans or offer to visit them. It's not like I don't make an effort to see my family, but they've never respected my boundaries before. This isn't the first time I've had to deal with my sister taking advantage of my kindness, and frankly, I'm tired of it. I'm also not some cold, heartless person. I just don't want to live in a situation where I feel like I'm being used or pushed into something I'm not okay with. Edit 2. Some of you have mentioned that I could have just rented a hotel room for them. I understand where you're coming from, but that's not the point. I shouldn't have to foot the bill for something like that, especially when I've made it clear I can't accommodate them. I don't think offering to help them find a place to stay was unreasonable, and I certainly don't think I should be expected to pay for their stay. Thanks for the feedback, everyone. It's been a lot to process, but I'm reading through all of your comments. AITA for telling my brother he's not invited to my wedding after he ignored my request to help with my wedding plans. I, 28F, am getting married in 6 months to the love of my life, Mark, 30M. I've been with him for 3 years, and we're planning a small but beautiful wedding with just close family and friends. The planning process has been a bit of a roller coaster, but I'm excited and happy with how everything is coming together. One thing that's been stressing me out, though, is my brother, Dave, 33M. Dave and I have always had a somewhat rocky relationship. He's the type of guy who, if it's not directly affecting him, will not lift a finger to help anyone else. He's been like that since we were kids, and while it used to bother me more when we were younger, I've learned to just accept that's who he is. A few months ago, when I started wedding planning, I asked him if he could help me with a few things. I didn't expect him to take over just simple stuff like helping with the invitations or maybe even handling some of the RSVPs. I thought maybe it would give us a chance to bond a little and also help with the massive workload that comes with organizing a wedding. Plus, I thought it would be a nice gesture for him to support me in this way, especially since I've always supported him through his life events, even when they weren't things I was super interested in. I gave him a few weeks heads up, telling him I'd love his help and that it would mean a lot to me. I also told him that there would be no pressure to do anything crazy, just small tasks here and there. His response was pretty much a flat-out no. He said he didn't have the time and was too busy with his own life. I didn't push, figuring he just had a lot going on, but I was honestly disappointed. I would have thought that for something as significant as a wedding, he would have been a little more willing to pitch in. A couple of weeks later, I reached out to him again, tried to keep it light and easy. I asked if he could at least help with gathering addresses for the invitations, or if he could help me source a photographer. I even offered to pay him for his time if he was worried about it being a hassle. He again turned me down, saying he didn't have time, and that was too much work. I got frustrated, but I tried to let it slide. After all, this was just my brother being himself. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so I started asking some of my other family members and friends for help. I eventually found people who were more than willing to pitch in, and while I was a little bummed about Dave's lack of involvement, I got over it and moved on. Then the real issue started. A few weeks ago, I sat down with my fiancée to finalize the guest list. It was a small wedding, and the venue had a strict capacity limit. I started going through the list, marking down the people we were definitely inviting, and then getting to those we were less sure about. My brother, Dave, was already on the list, but when I really thought about it, I realized that I wasn't sure if I wanted him there. Dave hadn't offered any support during the planning. On top of that, he had been making snide comments about my wedding for months. At first, it was little jabs like, "How much is this wedding costing you guys?" Or, "Are you sure you don't want to just elope?" Weddings are such a waste of money. But it escalated over time. At one point, when I was talking to him about wedding dress shopping, he made a comment about how I was just wasting my time looking for something too fancy when I should just get a white dress from a store like Target. It wasn't a joke. I could tell he genuinely thought that way. Then, 2 weeks ago, I mentioned that I had finally booked the venue I wanted, and he responded with another overpriced place that doesn't even look that nice. But hey, whatever, it's your money. It hurt. A lot. It felt like my brother was trying to sabotage something that was really important to me, and I didn't get why he couldn't just be happy for me. After that conversation, I made the decision that I didn't want him at the wedding anymore. He hadn't helped when I asked. He had been openly critical, and quite frankly, he didn't deserve a spot at such a special day in my life. I decided to talk to my fiancé about it, and after discussing it with him, we both agreed that it would be better to cut Dave from the guest list. I sent Dave a message last week saying that, due to the limited guest list and the fact that we were focusing on those who had supported us throughout the wedding planning, we had decided not to invite him to the wedding. I was calm and polite about it, but made it clear that his comments and lack of involvement in the planning process had led to our decision. Dave was livid. He immediately texted me back calling me selfish, saying that he was family, and I should have just sucked it up and invited him like a decent sister. He claimed that I was throwing a tantrum over nothing and that I was just being petty because he didn't want to help. He also accused me of being unreasonable and trying to punish him for not giving me what I wanted. I'm torn. On one hand, I feel like I made the right call. I can't keep letting my brother's toxic behavior affect me, especially on one of the happiest days of my life. On the other hand, I do feel bad about cutting him out, but I also feel like it's not fair for him to treat me the way he has and still expect to be invited. I talked to my mom about it, and she thinks I'm being overly sensitive and should just let it go for the sake of family peace. She says that it's just a wedding and that I should focus on the bigger picture. But to me, the bigger picture is about respect and support. I don't feel like I've gotten that from him. So, AITA for telling my brother he's not invited to my wedding because he ignored my requests for help and made disrespectful comments about it. Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law use my wedding dress for her wedding. I, 28F, got married to my husband, 30M, in a beautiful ceremony last year. We had a pretty traditional wedding, and one of the things that made it especially memorable for me was the wedding dress I wore. It wasn't expensive or extravagant, but had been in my family for generations. It was my great-grandmother's dress, passed down to my grandmother, then to my mother, and finally to me. I always dreamed of wearing on my wedding day, and when the time came, I was so proud to carry on the tradition. Now, my husband's sister, 34F, let's call her Carla, is getting married. Carla and I have never been particularly close. We're polite to each other at family gatherings, but we don't exactly spend a lot of time together. Our relationship has always been a little strained because of a variety of reasons. She's always been the favorite child in the family, and there's a bit of sibling rivalry between her and my husband, though they don't talk about it much. I've never been part of that dynamic, but I've always been aware of it. A couple of weeks ago, Carla asked me if she could wear my wedding dress for her wedding. She said she was struggling to find a dress that felt special and that she'd always admired mine. I was taken aback, but I tried to be as diplomatic as possible in my response. I told her that I wasn't comfortable with the idea because the dress was a family heirloom, and it was something very personal to me. I explained that I had worn it with the understanding that it would be passed down to my daughter or another family member, and I wasn't ready to let it go. Carla wasn't happy with my answer. She told me I was being selfish and that it wasn't fair for me to hoard the dress when she could be wearing it to create her own memories. She said that her wedding was going to be just as important as mine and that I was being petty by not sharing something that could make her day special too. She also brought up the fact that she had helped me with some wedding planning, even though I never directly asked her for help, and that I owed her for her support. At this point, I started to feel a bit cornered. I had always been taught to be generous and to compromise, especially with family, but the dress was such a significant part of my life. It wasn't just a piece of clothing. It represented my connection to my ancestors and the tradition that had been passed down through the generations. I didn't want to just hand it over to someone who wasn't even that close to me, especially since she hadn't even been particularly supportive of my wedding in the past. After I turned her down, Carla became more persistent. She began texting me daily, sometimes multiple times a day, telling me how important it was for her and how hurt she was by my refusal. She told me that I was being spiteful and that if I really cared about family, I would let her wear the dress. She even went as far as to say that I was ruining her wedding by not letting her wear it, which felt like a huge exaggeration to me. I eventually stopped responding to her texts, hoping the situation would blow over. But last weekend, she came over to my house unannounced. I was in the middle of making dinner when she rang the doorbell, and I let her in, unsure of what to expect. She immediately went on the offensive, telling me that I was being unreasonable and that I had no right to keep the dress all to myself. She even suggested that I should get over myself and stop being so precious about it. I calmly told her that I wasn't changing my mind, and I asked her to leave if she wasn't going to respect my decision. After she left, I felt exhausted and upset. I talked to my husband about it, and he said that he understood why I didn't want to lend the dress out, but he thought I could have been a bit more considerate of Carla's feelings. He said that Carla had been through a lot of personal struggles and that maybe I should try to see it from her perspective. While I agreed that Carla had her own issues, I still didn't think I should have to sacrifice something so personal to make her happy. The situation has been tense ever since, and now my in-laws are getting involved. They've started reaching out to me, asking why I'm being so difficult, and telling me that it's just a dress and that I should let Carla wear it if it's going to make her happy. Some of my friends have also weighed in, saying that I'm being too protective and that Carla is right to be hurt by my refusal. They all seem to think that it's not a big deal and that I'm making a mountain out of a molehill. I've tried to explain that it's not just about the dress, but about the family tradition and my own personal connection to it. I feel like no one is really hearing me, and I'm starting to wonder if I'm being too rigid about it. I've never been one to cause conflict, but I also don't want to give in to pressure just because it's easier or because Carla is upset. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law wear my wedding dress. Or should I just let it go and put aside my feelings for the sake of family peace? AITA for refusing to attend my best friend's wedding because of the way she treated me during my engagement? I, 30F, am in a bit of a dilemma and need some outside perspective because I'm starting to feel like I might be the bad guy here. For some background, I've been best friends with Rachel, 29F, since college. We've always had a close relationship, or at least I thought we did. We've supported each other through a lot of life's ups and downs, and I genuinely thought she was someone I could rely on, even though we've had our differences over the years. Last year, I got engaged to my now fiancé, Daniel, 32M. We had been together for 4 years before getting engaged, and I was beyond excited to share the news with my closest friends and family. Rachel was one of the first people I called, and her response was lukewarm, to say the least. Instead of congratulating me, she said, "Wow, that was fast. Are you sure you're ready?" I was a bit taken aback, but I shrugged it off. Maybe she was just shocked. I mean, we had talked about getting married before, but no one expected the proposal to happen when it did. Fast forward a few months to when I started planning the wedding. I asked Rachel to be my maid of honor, which I thought was a no-brainer since we'd been so close for years. She accepted, but the energy from her was weird. She didn't seem as excited as I'd hoped, and every time I brought up details about the wedding, she seemed disengaged or overly critical. At first, I thought it was just stress or maybe something going on in her life, but it started to become a pattern. When I went dress shopping, Rachel came with me, but she spent most of the time texting on her phone. At one point, she said, "I don't get why you're so obsessed with getting the perfect dress. Isn't it just a dress?" I was disappointed, but kept my cool, assuming maybe she was just having a bad day. But then things got worse. The real issue started when I told Rachel I was planning to have a smaller, more intimate wedding. It was always going to be a more low-key celebration with just close family and friends. I didn't want a huge spectacle. I was clear with everyone that I didn't want to deal with drama, and I expected those close to me to understand that. However, when I told Rachel, she flipped. She asked me, "Why are you making this all about you? Shouldn't this be about us as a couple, not just your preferences?" I tried to explain that it wasn't about excluding anyone, but that I wanted the day to feel personal and meaningful and not like some over-the-top show. But Rachel didn't want to hear it. She started pushing for a larger guest list, including people who I didn't even know that well, people I hadn't seen in years, and family members who had caused drama in my life. She even suggested I invite her ex-boyfriend, who, by the way, I'm not even sure why she's still in touch with. I was firm in my decision, and this caused a lot of tension between us. Over the next few weeks, Rachel became increasingly distant. She started making snarky comments about my wedding planning choices. "It must be nice to have all this time to plan a wedding," she'd say, even though I was working full-time and dealing with a lot of stress. Or, "Are you really going to spend so much money on flowers? That's just wasteful." To make matters worse, she started criticizing my fiancé, saying things like, "I don't get why you're marrying Daniel. He's not even that great." And it wasn't just in passing. She would bring it up regularly, and the comments were starting to get under my skin. The last straw was when she told me she was too busy to help with any of the planning. I had asked her to help with a few simple tasks like addressing invitations or picking out decorations. These weren't huge responsibilities, but I thought it would be fun to work on them together. Instead, she told me she was too stressed with her own life and basically just bailed on me. I tried to talk to her about it, but she brushed me off, saying I was being dramatic and that I was overreacting. She claimed she was just trying to help me see the bigger picture and that I was being selfish by focusing on all these small details. At that point, I started to seriously question the friendship. The lack of support and the constant undermining of my decisions really stung. I felt like Rachel wasn't happy for me, and it was hurting me more than I was willing to admit. I started distancing myself from her, not out of malice, but because I just couldn't handle the negativity anymore. Eventually, I told Rachel that I didn't want her to be my maid of honor anymore. I explained that her behavior had been hurtful, and I didn't feel like she was supporting me in the way I needed her to. I said I would still love her to be at the wedding, but I couldn't have someone in such a pivotal role if they weren't going to be there for me. Rachel was furious. She accused me of making everything about myself and said I was ruining our friendship for the sake of a wedding. She said I was being selfish and that I was being an awful friend. I felt heartbroken, but ultimately stood by my decision. I didn't want someone who didn't respect my boundaries or choices to be so close to the most important day of my life. A few weeks later, I sent her an invitation to the wedding, but I didn't hear from her for weeks after that. When I finally did hear from her, it was to tell me she wasn't coming. She said she couldn't support me after the way I treated her and that I was being unreasonable. Now, I'm left wondering if I went too far. My wedding is in a few weeks, and I'm still mourning the loss of my friendship with Rachel. I know we've had issues before, but this whole situation just feels like too much. I keep second-guessing myself. Did I overreact? Should I have tried harder to make things work with her? I'm just so confused. So, AITA for refusing to attend her wedding because of the way she treated me during my engagement? AITA for not wanting to attend my sister's wedding because she's marrying my ex? So here's the deal. I, 26F, have a sister, Rachel, 30F, and for the most part, we've had a pretty good relationship. We've always been close, even though she's 4 years older than me. Growing up, we fought like any siblings do, but overall, I'd say we were more allies than enemies. We share the same friend group, and up until recently, we got along just fine. However, about 3 years ago, I ended things with my ex, Ben, 28M. We were together for about 4 years, and it was a pretty serious relationship. We'd talked about getting married and had plans to move in together, but things fell apart when he cheated on me. It hit me hard, and I really struggled to move on for a while. Ben and I were not just in a romantic relationship, but we also had a deep friendship, so it felt like losing two people at once. Anyway, after the breakup, I did my best to put it all behind me. It was hard, but I made peace with it eventually, and Ben and I didn't speak for a year. I didn't want to hold on to any anger or bitterness, but I also didn't want to be around him or keep him in my life. Fast forward to last summer. I was hanging out with Rachel and some of our friends, and she casually mentioned that she had been talking to Ben again. I was a little taken aback, but I didn't want to overreact. I assumed that they were just reconnecting as friends. After all, she and Ben were always friendly, and I never thought they were anything more than acquaintances. But then, a few months ago, Rachel dropped the bombshell. She was dating Ben. I didn't know how to react. Part of me wanted to scream, but another part of me was just numb. Rachel had always known how much Ben hurt me, how he broke my heart. She'd even been one of the few people I confided in during the aftermath of our breakup. To say I was hurt would be an understatement. I tried to stay calm and have a rational conversation with Rachel. I told her I wasn't okay with her dating Ben. I explained that I felt betrayed by both of them. Rachel insisted that they had a real connection and that she didn't see why I was making such a big deal out of it. She told me that Ben was different now, that he'd changed, and that he was a good guy again. I couldn't understand how she could just ignore everything that had happened between him and me, especially since she had been so supportive of me during our breakup. She brushed off my concerns, saying that I needed to let go of the past and be happy for her. But I couldn't. I kept feeling like she was choosing Ben over me, like she didn't care about my feelings at all. Things became really tense between us after that conversation. I didn't want to cut her out of my life, but I couldn't just pretend like everything was fine either. Then came the wedding announcement. Rachel and Ben were getting married, and of course I was invited. It was like a slap in the face. I couldn't believe that after everything, she was going through with it. I wasn't sure what to do. Part of me wanted to just avoid the whole thing and pretend like it wasn't happening. But the other part of me felt like I should at least try to go for the sake of family. I didn't want to lose my sister over this, but I also didn't want to watch my ex marry her. I reached out to a few friends for advice, and their responses were all over the place. Some of them told me I was being unreasonable, that I should just move on and be happy for Rachel. Others agreed with me that it was a huge betrayal and that I didn't have to be okay with it, let alone attend the wedding. But no matter what anyone said, I just couldn't bring myself to be excited about it. The final straw came when Rachel confronted me about my decision not to go to the wedding. She was hurt that I wasn't supporting her and accused me of making everything about myself. She said that if I didn't come, it would be a sign that I didn't care about her or her happiness. I tried to explain that it wasn't about her, but about the way I felt about Ben and the fact that I couldn't just forget how he treated me. She told me that if I truly loved her, I would let go of my past with Ben and be there for her on her special day. I felt like I was being asked to choose between my own emotional well-being and my relationship with my sister. It was one of the hardest decisions I've had to make in my life. Ultimately, I decided to tell her that I couldn't attend the wedding. I needed time to process everything, and I didn't want to put myself in a situation where I'd be forced to act like everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. Since then, Rachel and I haven't spoken much. She's still angry at me, and she keeps telling me how disappointed she is in my decision. She says I'm being childish and selfish. I feel horrible, but I just don't know how to make peace with the situation. I love my sister, but I don't think I can support her marrying my ex. So, AITA for not wanting to go to my sister's wedding because she's marrying my ex? I honestly don't know if I'm being unreasonable here, and I could really use some perspective. So, here's the situation. I, 28F, am getting married in 6 months to my fiancée, Alex, 30M. We've been planning this wedding for over a year now. We had to reschedule twice because of the pandemic, and we're finally locked in for a beautiful venue, a decent-sized guest list, and all the traditional stuff that comes with a wedding. We're doing it the way we want, and it's been a long time coming. Now, my brother, Mark, 32M, has been dating his girlfriend, Laura, 31F, for a few years. I don't know her super well, but we've had a few family gatherings together. Mark and Laura have always talked about getting married, but for reasons I won't go into, they've never really gotten around to it. They've been engaged for about a year now, and for the last few months, there have been increasing hints about how they're planning a wedding soon. Here's where the issue comes in. I found out about a month ago that Laura wants to have her wedding on the same day as mine. At first, I thought I must have misunderstood. I was shocked, so I asked Mark about it directly. And yes, Laura had apparently set her sights on the same date I had already booked my wedding for, my dream wedding day. She'd never mentioned it before, and I definitely didn't know anything about her plans, but she told me that it was the only date the venue she wanted was available. I was floored. She said she was aware that I had been planning for this date for a long time, but she seemed totally fine with it, like it wasn't a big deal. I went into full panic mode. I didn't want to sound like a bridezilla, but I immediately talked to Alex about it. He was just as shocked as I was. We decided that I'd talk to Mark and Laura about it, but I really didn't know how to approach the conversation. I mean, I'd been planning this for a year. We'd already sent out invitations, and the vendors were booked. Changing things would be incredibly hard, and at that point, I didn't want to either. When I spoke to Mark, I tried to keep calm. I told him that I'd been planning my wedding for over a year, and that I didn't feel comfortable sharing the date with Laura. It wasn't just about the logistics. I didn't want my special day to be overshadowed by another wedding happening at the same time. I wanted my wedding to be about me and Alex, not about competing with Laura's big day. Mark seemed surprised, but not in the way I expected. He kept saying things like, it's just a coincidence, or you guys are getting married at different times of the day, so it'll be fine. But that didn't sit right with me. He didn't seem to understand why this was such a big deal. I told him that the fact that we'd both be getting married on the same day would cause confusion for family members, guests, and just generally make the whole event feel less special. Laura, when I finally spoke to her, was even less understanding. She said that she had her heart set on this particular date and that she wouldn't change it for anyone. I tried to explain that I've been planning my wedding for over a year and that it was a huge deal for me. She said that she had every right to get married on the date she chose, and that I was being too possessive of my day. She even brought up the idea that it's not like we can't both have a good time. She seemed genuinely confused as to why I was upset, and to be honest, that was the point where I started to feel really hurt. I'm trying to keep it together, but I can't help feeling like Laura's totally disregarding the fact that I've been planning my wedding for a long time, while she's just kind of waltzing in with no consideration for the fact that it's my day. I'm the one who's been waiting for this moment for years, and now it feels like it's being overshadowed by her insistence on getting married on the same date. So, I told both Mark and Laura that I would not be okay with them having their wedding on the same day as mine. I said I was happy to help them find a different date, but I wasn't going to budge on the timing. I also offered to help with venue suggestions or anything else they needed, but I drew the line at sharing the date. They didn't take it well. Mark is really upset with me and says I'm being unreasonable. He told me that it's just a date, and I should be more understanding since it's not like I'm the only person in the world getting married. I understand that they might feel hurt by my response, but at the same time, I feel like they're being incredibly insensitive to the fact that this is my wedding. I've always been a supportive sister, and I've never been selfish or unreasonable with family matters, but this is just too much for me to handle. Now, my parents are involved, and they're not taking sides, but they think that I might be being too rigid and should just let them get married on the same day. They argue that there's no reason for me to make such a big deal about the date, but I feel like they don't really understand why this is so important to me. I feel torn because I don't want to alienate my family or come off as a total bridezilla, but I also don't want my wedding day to be shared with someone else. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law have a second wedding on my wedding day? I honestly don't know if I'm being unreasonable here or if I'm just standing up for myself. AITA for refusing to give my sister-in-law my kidney after she accused me of being selfish? So, this is a bit of a complicated situation. My 30M sister-in-law, Sarah, 33F, has been struggling with kidney failure for the past couple of years. It's been a tough time for her and my brother, 35M, who's been doing everything he can to support her. My wife, Emily, 28F, and I have always been close to Sarah and her family, and we've tried to be there for them in any way possible. But now, things have taken a really bad turn, and I'm genuinely torn about whether I'm in the wrong. Sarah's condition has been getting worse. She's been on dialysis for a while, and her doctors have been telling her that a kidney transplant is her best chance at survival. She's been waiting on the transplant list for a long time, but as we all know, organ transplants can take years to happen, and she's been struggling with the waiting game. Her health has been declining, and the whole family is obviously very concerned. A couple of months ago, Sarah's doctors told her that her kidneys were deteriorating rapidly and that her only option for survival was a kidney from a living donor. She's been asking family members to get tested to see if they're a match. Naturally, she turned to my brother first, but he wasn't a match. Then she started asking the rest of the family, and eventually, she asked me. At first, I didn't think much of it. I mean, it's a big ask, but I love Sarah like a sister, and I wanted to see if I could help. I want to get tested to see if I was a match, and after a few weeks, the results came back. Turns out, I'm a perfect match. I was honestly relieved when I heard that, because it felt like a small way I could help save her life. Here's where things get complicated. After I found out that I was a match, Sarah and my brother became really pushy about me donating my kidney. They kept asking me when I could do it, how soon I could schedule the surgery, and whether I'd be willing to do it as soon as possible. At first, I thought they were just desperate, and I tried to be understanding. But as the weeks went on, their tone started to shift, and I began to feel like I was being pressured into making a decision that I wasn't ready for. I had a conversation with Emily about it, because I was feeling overwhelmed. Emily's reaction was a little more cautious. She reminded me that it's a huge deal to donate an organ, and we both agreed that I needed to think about it carefully. I'm healthy, but I do have a young daughter, 2 years old, and I've never had surgery before. It was a big decision to make, and I didn't want to jump into it without considering all the risks. I ended up asking Sarah if she would give me some more time to think it over. I told her that I wasn't saying no, but I just needed to make sure that I fully understood the risks involved and that I wasn't making a decision out of guilt or pressure. Sarah wasn't happy with that. She told me that time was running out for her and that I was being selfish for hesitating. She said she was dying, and I was the only one who could help her. After that, the pressure kept mounting. Sarah started telling other family members that I was refusing to donate. Even though I hadn't said no, I just wanted more time to think. She even went so far as to tell Emily that I was being selfish and inconsiderate, and that I was putting my comfort over her life. The more I thought about it, the more I started to feel like she was guilt-tripping me into doing something I wasn't entirely comfortable with. I finally made the decision to talk to a doctor outside of Sarah's medical team. I wanted an unbiased opinion on the risks involved, and I wanted to understand the long-term impact of donating a kidney. After speaking to the doctor and doing some research, I learned that while kidney donation is generally safe, there are risks involved, including potential complications during surgery, long-term health effects, and the possibility of future kidney disease. I also learned that there's no guarantee Sarah's body will even accept the kidney, and the surgery might not be as successful as we hope. I also learned that if I were to donate, I would be required to take months off work to recover, and it could impact my ability to care for my family long-term. When I went back to Sarah and my brother to explain what I'd learned, they both got incredibly upset. Sarah accused me of being heartless and told me I was using technicalities to avoid helping her. She said I was overthinking everything and that I was wasting precious time when she could die at any moment. She called me selfish and said that if I truly loved her like family, I'd be willing to make this sacrifice without hesitation. I am torn. On one hand, I know she's suffering and that a kidney transplant could save her life. On the other hand, I'm scared of the risks involved, and I'm worried about my own family. I don't think it's selfish to take the time to weigh the decision carefully, but the constant pressure from Sarah and my brother is starting to make me question whether I'm being unreasonable. Emily and I have had long conversations about this, and she's been supportive but also a little frustrated with how Sarah has been treating me. She thinks I should stand my ground and not give in to the guilt, but she also doesn't want to come off as unsympathetic to Sarah's condition. AITA for not immediately agreeing to donate my kidney to my sister-in-law, even though I'm a match, and for needing more time to think it over. I feel like no matter what I do, someone is going to be upset with me. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding after she uninvited me. I, 29F, have a sister, 26F. Let's call her Sarah, who has always been the golden child in our family. Growing up, she was the one who got the most attention, the most praise, and the least amount of criticism. I, on the other hand, was the more quiet, introverted one. My parents always seemed to prefer Sarah's outgoing personality and her ability to make things happen. It was a dynamic that always rubbed me the wrong way, but I never said anything because I didn't want to cause problems. Still, I always felt like I had to work harder to get noticed. Fast forward to a couple of years ago, and Sarah got engaged to a guy named Mark. Mark is a decent guy, for what I can tell. He's friendly, polite, but he's also a bit of a mama's boy. This is important for later. Anyway, when Sarah and Mark started planning their wedding, I assumed I would be involved like I had been for every big family event. I thought I'd be her maid of honor, or at least play a big role in the day. I was wrong. A couple of months ago, Sarah called me out of the blue to tell me that she had made a difficult decision. Apparently, she and Mark had discussed the guest list, and they both felt that having me at the wedding would be too complicated and uncomfortable. I was taken aback and tried to figure out why. She mentioned that Mark's mom had been vocal about not wanting too many outside influences at the wedding, especially from family members with complicated relationships. I asked her to clarify, and she said that I was just too intense sometimes, especially when it came to family events. I was shocked, to say the least. Sarah knows how hard I've worked to build and maintain relationships in the family, and I've never once caused any drama or issues. I think what she meant by intense is that I don't always buy into the whole everything's perfect family narrative. I speak up when something doesn't sit right with me, but I never thought that would lead to being uninvited from such an important event. When I asked Sarah why Mark's mom's opinion mattered so much, she said that they were trying to avoid any family drama, and she felt it was easier to just cut me from the guest list. She also implied that I was somehow responsible for some family tensions that were mostly related to my parents' dynamic, but that's a whole other story. She said if I didn't understand, she'd prefer to not have me attend at all. I was livid. I had been nothing but supportive of Sarah's relationship with Mark, even when I disagreed with some of his behavior. For example, Mark has this tendency to make passive-aggressive comment about things like how much my sister spends on her hobbies, or how he wishes she wouldn't go out with friends as often. I've never liked how he speaks to her, but I've kept my mouth shut because it's her choice to be with him. But now, I felt like she was prioritizing his family's comfort over mine. It was hard not to feel like I was being discarded for someone else's peace of mind. I told Sarah that I would not be attending the wedding if she felt that way about me. She tried to apologize, saying it wasn't personal, but I wasn't buying it. She still kept insisting that it was the best thing for everyone and that I could understand once the wedding day arrived. I said no, that I wasn't going to be in a room where I wasn't wanted or appreciated, especially for such a big life event. She said I was being dramatic and that I was overreacting. My parents, unsurprisingly, sided with her and told me to let it go. They said I should just move past it, and that Sarah had a lot of stress with the wedding planning. I don't care about wedding stress. I care about being treated like family. But now, they're all upset with me for ruining the situation. My mom said that I was making things harder on everyone, and that I should just go to the wedding and grin and bear it. The thought of sitting through a wedding where I'm openly unwelcome doesn't sit right with me, though. So, AITA? I don't think I'm wrong for refusing to go, but I feel like I'm the only one in the family who sees it that way. It's a huge moment for Sarah, and I want her to have the best day possible, but I also don't want to just roll over and accept being treated like an outsider in my own family. I'm genuinely torn because at the end of the day, it's not like I wanted to create drama. I just wanted to be treated with respect. Now, I'm not even sure if I'm making the right decision, but the more I think about it, the more I feel like I deserve to be in a place where I'm actually wanted, especially at something as important as a wedding. AITA for refusing to go. AITA for refusing to let my sister and her family stay at my house after they kicked me out of my own home for the weekend. So, a little background. I, 31M, have a pretty close relationship with my sister, Claire, 33F, though we have had our fair share of disagreements over the years. We both grew up in a pretty chaotic household, and while I've done my best to move on and build a life for myself, Claire tends to hold on to a lot of the past. She's also married to her husband, James, 35M, and they have 2 kids, Noah, 6, and Mia, 4. They live about 30 minutes away, so we see each other a couple of times a month, mostly for family gatherings, holidays, and occasional visits. Now, here's where things get complicated. About a month ago, I decided to plan a solo weekend trip to a cabin in the woods to unwind. I work from home, and it had been a stressful few months. Between work pressure and some personal stuff, I really just needed to get away. I've been planning this for a while, and it was something I was really looking forward to. I casually mentioned it to Claire, and she immediately became upset. She said, "Why didn't you tell me earlier? You know, we were planning to visit you that weekend for a family get-together." I was a little surprised because she had never mentioned this before, and the weekend in question wasn't a holiday or anything that we'd regularly get together for. So, I explained that I'd already booked everything and was really looking forward to the break. I thought she'd understand, but Claire kept insisting that I cancel my plans and stay home. She said it wasn't fair that I'd planned something without consulting her and that she really needed to see me that weekend. I told her I was sorry, but I couldn't cancel. It was something I'd been looking forward to for a long time. She seemed pretty upset, but I thought she'd get over it. I promised I'd make it up to her another time. Well, the day before I was set to leave, Claire called me again, this time sounding more desperate. She said that she and James were having some marital issues and that she needed to stay at my place for the weekend with the kids to get away from the tension. I was taken aback, but I agreed to let them stay because I thought she really needed support and she sounded like she was going through a tough time. But here's where things really started to go south. I let them stay, and within a couple of hours of their arrival, it became clear that this wasn't just a getaway for the weekend situation. It was a full-on takeover. Claire and James started rearranging things in my house, putting their kids' toys everywhere, and basically treating it like a second home. I tried to be patient and accommodating, but things only got worse. The kids were constantly running around, being loud, and making a mess. James didn't even bother to help with anything. He just sat on the couch and watched TV while Claire was running around trying to manage the chaos. I tried to be as laid back as possible, but it was really hard to relax. On top of that, Claire kept bringing up things that were totally unrelated to what I was dealing with. She started talking about her marriage, telling me how James had been distant and how she didn't know what to do about it. I didn't feel equipped to be her therapist, especially while I was trying to relax for the weekend. The breaking point came when Claire asked me if I could cancel my trip and spend the weekend with them. I was honestly shocked. I told her I'd already made plans and that this was my time to unwind. She seemed annoyed and said, "You can't be serious. You're going to leave your family here while you go off and have fun." I tried to explain that I had already paid for the cabin and it was non-refundable, but she didn't seem to care. She kept pushing. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I told her I was going to leave for my trip as planned and she could stay at my house, but that I needed some space. She didn't like that response, and we had a pretty heated argument. She accused me of being selfish and not prioritizing family. I tried to explain that I was doing this for my own mental health and that I had already compromised by letting them stay in the first place. In the end, I packed my things and left for the cabin. The weekend was a mix of relaxing and reflecting, but I couldn't stop thinking about how things had gone down with Claire. When I returned home on Sunday evening, they had already left. I got a message from Claire later that night, saying how disappointed she was in me and how I'd abandoned her during a tough time. She said I was acting like I didn't care about her and her family. Now, I feel torn. On the one hand, I think I did what was best for my own well-being, and I don't think I should have had to cancel my plans for her. On the other hand, I understand that she's going through a tough time, and maybe I could have handled it better. I don't know if I was too harsh or if she was being unreasonable. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister and her family stay at my house after they kicked me out of my own home for the weekend. AITA for refusing to pay my sister's rent after she moved in with me. I, 30M, have been living alone for about 5 years. I've always been a bit of a homebody, and I value my space. Last year, my younger sister, Sarah, 26F, hit a rough patch in her life. She had been living in a small apartment with her ex-boyfriend, but they broke up, and she was forced to leave. She had no place to go, so naturally, I offered her to move in with me temporarily while she figured things out. We've always been close, so I didn't think much of it when I told her she could stay. At first, everything was fine. She moved in, and we went about our business. She was working remotely, and I was working my usual office job. I made sure to set clear boundaries, telling her that while I was happy to have her stay, I'd appreciate it if she could pitch in with the household expenses like groceries and utilities. I wasn't expecting her to pay rent at first, but I did let her know that I couldn't afford to take on the entire burden of supporting her. In the beginning, she agreed. She would help with some groceries and occasionally buy cleaning supplies. But after a few months, things started to get weird. She stopped contributing much, and I started noticing that she wasn't taking things as seriously as I had hoped. She'd leave dishes around the house, and when I'd ask her clean up, she'd promise to do it later and then never follow through. Her job, which was supposed to be full-time, seemed to be less of a priority, and I'd find her sleeping in late or spending hours on her phone, scrolling through social media instead of working. I wasn't trying to be hard on her, but I started to feel like I was carrying more than my fair share of the load. A couple of months in, I asked her to start contributing more. Specifically, I wanted her to pay a portion of the rent. I told her that it wasn't fair for me to cover everything on my own while she was living here. I suggested she pay a small percentage, like 25% of the rent, considering she wasn't covering much else. She got upset. She told me that I should be grateful she's even living here, that she was going through a rough time, and that she didn't have the financial stability to pay rent right now. I sympathized with her, but I told her that I couldn't keep supporting her like this without some help. To be honest, I didn't think it was unreasonable. I've always been independent, and I know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck, but it just seemed like she wasn't putting in any effort to make things work. I started feeling like I was being taken advantage of. A few more months passed, and the tension between us grew. She'd keep making excuses for why she couldn't contribute. Either she wasn't making enough money, or she didn't have time to get a part-time job to help out. Meanwhile, I was paying all the bills, handling the housework, and trying to maintain my own work-life balance. I was getting exhausted. At one point, I lost my temper and told her that I couldn't keep living like this. I said if she didn't start paying rent, she'd have to move out. She got really upset and accused me of being selfish and unsupportive. She claimed that I was her family and should be helping her without expecting anything in return. That really hit me hard because it felt like she wasn't seeing things from my perspective. I tried to explain that I wasn't expecting her to pay the entire rent, but that she needed to contribute something and I couldn't just keep covering all the expenses while she barely did anything. She told me that it wasn't fair for me to put conditions on her staying here, and that she was already going through so much. After that argument, things just got worse. We started arguing more frequently. She complained about how I was controlling her life and how she felt like I didn't care about her struggles. Meanwhile, I felt like I was being taken advantage of and that she was just living off me without any regard for what I was going through. Finally, I made the decision to give her a specific timeline. I told her she had a month to either start contributing rent or find a place to stay. I didn't want to kick her out, but I was at my breaking point. She didn't take it well. She cried, saying that I was abandoning her when she needed me the most, and accused me of being a terrible brother. The emotional guilt trip worked for a bit, and I started to doubt my decision. But deep down, I knew I had to stand firm. The next day, she came to me with a proposal. She said she would try to find another place to live and would start looking for a job to pay rent. She asked if I could give her another couple of months to get back on her feet. I agreed, but I also made it clear that this was the last chance. She needed to show me that she was committed to making this work. But here's where things got even more complicated. A week later, she came back to me and told me she found a potential roommate situation. However, she asked if I would be willing to help her pay part of her security deposit and the first month's rent, since she didn't have enough saved up. I told her that while I wanted to help, I just couldn't afford to support her in that way anymore. She got upset again and accused me of being selfish. At this point, I was really starting to feel like I was caught between a rock and a hard place. I love my sister, and I want to support her, but I can't keep sacrificing my own well-being for her. So, I stuck to my decision and told her I wouldn't help financially with her move-out costs. She ended up finding another place to stay, and she moved out within the next few weeks. The aftermath has been rough. She's barely spoken to me since she moved out, and when she does, it's usually to tell me that I ruined our relationship. She says I should have helped her more, that family is supposed to support each other, and that I'm selfish for not helping her get back on her feet. I've been feeling pretty conflicted about the whole situation. Part of me feels like I did the right thing by setting boundaries and not letting her take advantage of me. But another part of me feels guilty for not doing more, especially since I know she's still struggling. AITA for refusing to pay her rent or give her financial help when she was living with me. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.